Well, I'm joined by our special guest this hour, an author of a brand new book called Good as Gold, and is a Sky News contributor. Justin Smith, it's so good to have you in our Melbourne studio. How are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. You?
Thank you. I'm good. Have a look at these books. They're fantastic.
Look at that.
This is your third book now.
Third book,
But the reason I've got you in is I think it's rare that readers and Australians, they often want to go and read off elsewhere. They want to go and read American, European stories. This story, Good as Gold, it's a quintessential Australian story, a fiction. What prompted you to write about the Melbourne Cup of all things?
I'm a sucker for a Western, right?
Yeah.
I love a Western. I'm a big Clint Eastwood, you know, the man with no name, you know, guns at 20 paces, horses, you know, women of poor reputation. I kind of love the whole Western thing. And a friend and I were having dinner and he said, you should write a Western next, you know. And I thought, and it just sort of sat with me for a while. And then I thought, an Australian Western though. And then something came up about the Melbourne Cup. And and I'm not a huge historian of the Melbourne Cup, so I look back to see when it was. For some reason, I thought it was, in the 1920s. It's 1861. And I thought, man, that is just prime Western territory there. So I decided to create some characters and do a rewriting of the first Melbourne Cup.
Because there are so many characters when it comes to the Melbourne Cup. You think about, just the horses themselves, the story behind them, Light Fingers, Parlap, Mackay Diva.
Yeah.
Winx obviously didn't run in the Melbourne Cup, but that iconic horse racing story. But I want to know what prompted you to then weave in this narrative around Victoria's origins as a gold town as well.
Well, it's huge. 1861, we were 10 years after the first gold strike, and before that, we were cutting down, redgum, sawing up and making bark huts. That was just the life we had before. And then gold came along and we just went boom into the stratosphere, we just completely changed. And we went, hey, at that point we had a lot of money and we thought, how are we going to make Melbourne big? How are we going to make Victoria big? So we put up a big purse and we said, we'll have one of the biggest horse races in the world. Yeah. And you look what it's become now, but back then, this was the first one. And the Turf Club and the Jockey Club back then were sort of vying for who's going to be big in the sport in Melbourne. So it was sort of a
Western battle.
Oh, it was a real battle. It was just a really exciting time. And gold was it. You got on a coach, no trains. There were only a few trains at that point. Yeah. This is just before trains really kicked in. And you get on a coach to go and make your fortune, and then you come back either with half a bugger all, or you come back with a little cash.
And where did I head to? Because I think you've got the fictional town of Mull Creek that this story's based in. But did you base it off an actual place?
Yeah, I kind of did. I based it on the town of Clunes, just in the size of it and whatever, because Clunes is where we got our first gold strike in 1851. But a couple of the mining executives that I wrote about in the book here aren't the nicest people in the world, and they were the founders of Clunes. And I thought, look, Clunes has got a really big and important historical society. And I thought, look, I hate misrepresenting people when I write a book, so I thought, look, some of the relatives of these mining executives would still be alive. So I thought, I'd rather, we'll make it a fictional town. Yeah. So, I went with Mull Creek, but it's based on those. But there were a lot of those gold mining towns back there. There was nothing happening. They were dead, and then all of a sudden the gold strike. And then we had the Chinese coming, we had Americans coming, we had the Irish. One of my relatives was in that area. My relatives was a man who was helping the Chinese get their mining licenses.
Wow.
So it was just an exciting time. And I kind of, and you mentioned before about books from the UK and America, and they're great. Look, they're great writers from over there. But
not Aussie, though.
But they're not Aussie. Come on, let's be frank. And particularly America, they're unashamed about writing about little towns and town names or whatever. And in Australia, we tend to cringe at that a bit. I'd like to be part of sort of stopping that and saying, hey, let's write about our own history and let's write stories about ourselves here and let's never be ashamed of it when we do. So I kind of like that sort of feel.
And your book was published by Penguin during the week, along with a number of other Australian books. I guess, what are you targeting this one towards? Is it the Father's Day market? Is it, why launch it?
Anyone who's willing to buy a book. I'm not picky if it's for Christmas or it's for Father's Day or just for yourself. Look, I only try and pitch it to people who like a good read and just want a good yarn. I mean, that's
good yarns.
A good, satisfying, and I think, my journalism background hopefully helps me out here. I just want a good, satisfying yarn that when people sort of get to the last page and they're still thinking about the characters days later. That's a lovely compliment I had. And the other compliment I had, which I love, is somebody said to me after I read it, they said, I loved it, but I had to Google to see what bits were real and what bits wasn't. And I thought, that's the best compliment you can get.
Oh, well, it's great to see your third book's out. Congratulations.
Thanks,
I
mate.
must be remiss of me, though, with a news program. You're one of our contributors.
Yeah.
I must ask you a question without notice. What do you make of the Andrews government at the moment and where it's at the moment? I mean, there's a by-election today out there, but with branch stacking things coming out at 5 o'clock yesterday, you're a former journo, you know what it's like when a story comes out at that time, and the Commonwealth Games. What's your assessment after so many years of experience in Melbourne about where the government sits right now?
Look, I think, like all premiers, and I don't have a political allegiance. I don't sit on one side or the other. But for me, Daniel Andrews was going along as a guy who got plenty of things wrong, got plenty of things right, probably like every other premier. And he was doing well. He was winning strong elections. Sadly, we've got a pretty pathetic, and have had, hopefully it's going to change, we've had a pretty pathetic opposition in Victoria. So he's been allowed to get away with murder. And sadly, I think over the last, it's probably a little bit longer, depending on who you ask, but over the last 6 months or so, there is just a bloody arrogance that has really kicked in with the Andrews government that I really hate seeing. Daniel Andrews stands up at those press conferences, and when people ask him people like you, ask him a very straight question, and he sort of acts like, well, this is a stupid question. Come on, we don't want leaders like that. We want people who are straight. And this Commonwealth Games thing was just appalling that they weren't straight with that. Going to China, not allowing any local media to go. This kind of arrogance, I'd love to see them dump it because we don't deserve it in Vic.
Sounds like, though, there's a lot of stories there that you just said about the Andrews government that you could write a fiction
on. There's a fourth book. A fourth book on the way, mate.
Justin,
the story of Vic.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're a ripper, mate. Thank you.
Watch out. I've got to watch my laptop as I go and shake your hand. Good luck with it all. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Simon.